The Darwin Innovation Hub, creating pathways to the future.
Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining in our webinar on how to stay connected whilst working remotely. It is 2 p.m. in Darwin on the 31st of March, and at the moment we are living in a whole new world. A world where we have been forced to go digital, and I often wonder at how fast we are able to implement change when we are forced to do so, rather than it just be a thought in the background of something we may do one day. And if it is so that we have all been able to move so quickly onto digital workforces, what else do we have or can we do just as quickly? Here at the Hub, we've always planned to take our workshops online in order to reach a bigger audience. And we have now had our literal butts kicked into gear simply so that we can just reach our existing audience. So how do we stay connected whilst working remotely? What are the tools that we can use to digitise our businesses and our lives right now in a manner in which we still stay connected to each other and not so over-isolated? At the Darwin Innovation Hub, we are lucky to have a team of leading experts which cover a wide range of industries and skill sets. And today we're going to be listening to our digital strategist and expert in residence, Ben Smith. Ben has over 20 years experience in providing ICT solutions and support across a range of industries. His philosophy is to promote the understanding that digital technologies provide the means that enable people to transform businesses and society rather than being the transformation itself. Ben represents the Northern Territory ICT profession and industry on the National Australian Computer Society Congressional Committee. He plays many leading roles in the life cycle of IT, including delivery, design, implementation, and ongoing support. Before I hand over to Ben, please familiarise yourself with the Zoom channel. You're welcome to send through questions for live answers, and for those that we cannot answer live, we will follow up with you offline. So welcome to Ben, and I will now hand over.
Excellent, thanks Emma, and hi to everyone. I'm just going to share my screen and I'll ask if someone can confirm that it's being presented. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Excellent. All right, so welcome to today's online session where we're going to talk about effective ways to stay connected to your teams whilst working remotely. So typically for a lot of us up until now, the ability to work remotely provided us with quiet time away from the office where we could focus on a particular task at hand. While we could still check in via telephone, email, video conferencing, etc., collaboration was not the compelling reason for someone to necessarily work from home. In our current climate, being able to collaborate whilst being away from the office for extended periods of time will be essential in trying to maintain normality in such an exceptional period of our careers. So today what we're hoping to do is provide you with the insights to the different tools that you can employ to continue to collaborate online whilst working remotely from your colleagues. So I've got a very high level agenda here. Now, as Emma pointed out, if you've got any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to use the chat feature to send those through. And at the end of each slide, I'll try to address any questions, or as Emma said, we'll take them offline at the end of the session. Okay, so getting connected. So this is actually something I'm pretty proud of. So while we work in the office, we're typically accustomed to business grade internet connections with high capacity, and we're able to quickly download large volumes of data. Now, while you're working from home, you might find that depending on the speed of your internet, you might not experience the same responsiveness, when accessing online systems or when using video content. Sometimes the quality can be pixelated. Now, fortunately, in metropolitan Darwin at least, we have access to the best possible version of the NBN possible in the majority of cases. So unlike other states who have fibre to the node, which is the picture on the left of the slide, Darwin actually has fibre to the premise, which is the picture on the right. And essentially what that means is fibre to the node is where fibre is run to the telephone exchange and then copper from that telephone exchange to your home. Whereas in Darwin, in the majority of cases, we've got a direct fibre connection to the NBN box inside our homes. And what this means is we have the best possible internet connection in the country, And typically you can get speeds up to 100 megabits per second. So yes, we've definitely got the best internet in my opinion, and I've witnessed that in my travels. So whilst most people in Darwin have the best possible physical connection available, it pays to check with your service provider what plan you're on. Now, your plan will dictate the type of experience that you'll receive, which consists of both a speed and a download limit. So the speed is your 100 megabit per second, and then your download limit is how much download that you can consume in one particular month. Now, typically, ISPs offer unlimited data for download these days, except when you're on the cheaper plans or depending on the service provider. So depending on how many people are in your household using the internet at the same time, you'd really want to consider having access to the best possible plan available, which provides 100 megabit download speed per second. Now, this is to ensure that, and especially now where it might not be a family watching Netflix at night, when everyone's at home during the day, you really want to ensure that if you've got your partner working in one room, you're working in another, you've got multiple children playing games or streaming movies, you really need to have a stable and fast connection for most of your business applications, and especially things like video conferencing as we're doing today. So additionally, NBN Co have only in the last week increased overall network capacity by 40%, and providers such as YouTube and Netflix, who represent a large chunk of all of the internet usage across the world, have recently increased the compression on their content. So technically we should have more internet bandwidth available to us now than ever before, but it really pays to check what plan you're on. Now, if for whatever reason you're experiencing degradation in your connectivity, most telecommunication providers are currently providing extra data capacity for your mobile phone. I'm with Telstra, and what it means is that it's actually possible to connect your mobile phone to your laptop or to your computer and tether over 4G rather than going through your home network. So if your children are watching movies during the day, you can tether off of your phone and the internet quality should not be interrupted. So speak to your telco regarding what's available on your particular plan. The other day I signed up and it was literally a 2-minute process. I received, I think it was an extra 30 gigabytes in download capacity for my mobile phone. And that was all confirmed to me within an hour. So it's really easy to do. And the last point I wanted to make is if you're intending on performing a lot of video conferencing at home, or you're looking to synchronize or upload really large files to the internet, so not download, but upload to the internet, you might want to consider talking to your ISP about what business plans that they have available. So typically at home, we have a little bit cheaper, but a consumer grade internet plan. And whilst they might offer really quick download speeds, typically you won't get the best upload speed possible. And that can really affect the video rate of your online meeting, as an example. Could be the audio quality as well, but also, especially more importantly, if you're transferring very large files like an architect might do, as an example. So if you are experiencing degradation in your service, definitely call your ISP first to talk to them about the options, but also maybe consider a business plan in the interim. And if you do go to move to a business plan, make sure when you're talking to your ISP that you can actually revert back in the coming months, because the last thing you want to do is sign up to an expensive business plan that might see you through for 12 months when we may only be in this situation for another 6. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Do we have any questions, Emma?
Not at this stage, Ben.
Excellent. Okay. So staying connected and resilient. So already in the last few weeks, we've already seen an increase in the amount of scams which target us with supposedly useful information about welfare payments or the coronavirus. Now, some of these, as normal, they might either look like really obvious scams in the sense that they're written very poorly, or it could be obvious because the logo doesn't look quite right, or the email address doesn't seem to be the same as what you'd expect. But then others look very, very genuine. And I've come across a number where if it wasn't for closer inspection, I too would have been fooled. So typically the way scammers work is that if only 1% of people responded to an SMS or an email sent to millions, they'd still have a very large pool of people from that 1% who they can try and con out of your personal information. And that could be credit card information, it could be passwords, it could be information about your secret passwords, so if they're asking for mother's maiden names, etc. So it's really important to make sure that you're only visiting genuine links, and you map those back to domains ending in things like .gov.au, for example. So if I was to receive an email or an SMS from Australia Post, I wouldn't necessarily click on that link, but I would follow their web page to see if I could find the relevant information that they were talking about. If you're ever in doubt about a link, I know this probably sounds silly in this day and age, but you're best to ring the person or the department who sent it to you. So again, using that case of Australia Post, if they were talking to you about your deliveries and they required extra information, you'd be far better, even though it's going to be a little bit more time consuming, to ring them first to qualify the questions that they are supposedly asking, rather than to take the simple approach, the quick approach of clicking on that link and then finding later you've got to invest days, if not months, trying to recover your identity. So similarly, for a few years now, scammers have been sending false invoices, which are extremely convincing, and I've received a number of these which do look very, very convincing. And I'm aware of a number of small and big businesses around Darwin that have paid invoices, which were scams, only to find out later that the BSB and account number were the only thing that was different on that invoice. And the only reason they found out that the invoice was a scam was when the actual supplier was ringing months later to ask about overdue debt. So always review when you receive your invoices, the payment details of your latest invoice to make sure that the details match. The easiest way, or the method I follow for a lot of the invoices I pay, is that I've got them preset in my banking app, so that when I do go to pay, the details are already there. If not, then I double check the BSB account number or the payment details that they're providing. Again, if you're uncertain, you're far better off to ring your supplier to make sure that you've got the details correct than to make the mistake of paying the money elsewhere and potentially never recovering that.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah, absolutely, Emma.
Another thing to take note of is when you do receive an invoice, check on the arrow down that shows the email address that the invoice actually came from.
Yes.
If it's not from the business.com.au that you're used to dealing with, and it's from a .xyzft, it's most likely a scam.
Absolutely, that's right. And sometimes, not that I'm suggesting that you do respond, but if you hit the reply button, it might be easier to see who that email would be going back to, and that could expose the fact that it's not actually from a Telstra or an Australia Post. Yeah, you're 100% right there, Emma.
Yeah, thanks.
No problems, thank you. Now, it also goes without saying, whilst we're talking about cybersecurity concerns, that we should always be making sure that our computers are running the latest antivirus updates, as well as overall general security updates. Now, fortunately, operating systems such as Microsoft Windows now provide this for free. So all you need to do to check that is to follow a very simple process on your computer. And in actual fact, on the presentation, you'll see that there's a link. So when I send this presentation out after today's session, you'll be able to click on that link, and you'll have instructions on how you can check to make sure that Microsoft Windows security and antivirus updates are up to date. And obviously, this might sound obvious actually, but maybe it's not for everyone. But it always makes sense to change your password every few months. And I'm sure we all know that. What you may not know though, is that for a lot of the platforms that we use now, a lot of them provide two-factor authentication. Now, for those of you that aren't aware what two-factor authentication is, you probably are aware of what it is, you just don't know the term. So two-factor authentication, or 2FA, is something that you're probably used to when you're logging on to your bank. You'll log on with your customer number, your password, and then you'll be asked to put in the code that you may have received via SMS or via a separate app. Now, so for a lot of other platforms that you might use, if you can try to dig around and see if they've got a two-factor authentication option, that's very useful, because what it does mean is that someone might have your username, someone might have your password, but unless they've got your telephone, there's no way that they're going to be able to access your details in your account. So where possible, try to find that two-factor authentication option.
And for those websites that don't have two-factor authentication, and for those people who do struggle to remember passwords or don't want to write them down in a book, or really just have too many accounts, do you suggest using software such as LastPass?
But yeah, most definitely. So I'm an Apple convert, and fortunately with Apple, if you've got Apple products, and for me, I've got an Apple Watch, an Apple phone, an Apple iPad, an Apple Mac. I'm very much embedded in that ecosystem. For me, all of that's built in already. So essentially what I can do is the computer actually offers a random password. It then saves that password. And when I try to log on using other devices, it pulls that up. Now, that's really secure because that password is random. I never have to look at that password or know it because it's remembered and synchronized across all of my other devices. I can still choose to change that if I like every month. And if I ever did need access to it, I can actually get access to it through the keychain on my phone or my computer. But where you might not have an Apple product or the range of Apple products where that makes it really easy, yeah, LastPass is one option. Another option I think is 1Password from memory. There are a number of them out there, and for individual users, typically those services are provided for free. Where they make their money is in providing enterprise and business solutions. So that's definitely an option worth pursuing, because of what it does mean is that rather than, and that's another probably important point, Emma, that you were alluding to, is that you really don't want to have the same password for everything that you access, because if you do share your password with someone for whatever reason, or if someone does compromise your password, again, for whatever reason, not only do they have access to your email, if that was the purpose of you sharing the password, but now potentially they could have access to your banking details, etc. So again, that's where a 1Pass or a password keeper software app does come in handy, because you can have multiple passwords and not have to recall them all.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I like about those software is I used to run a large team of remote workers and had clients that were remote as well, and we were a virtual office provider for them, and they were able to give us their passwords for logins, for remote access to that email management, or to whatever software they wanted us to use, but yet we never had to know what their passwords were. So it was that rolling, automatically generated password, and we didn't know what it was. We just had to click a button and the dots appeared. So it's good if you need to share access without having to hand over personal details.
Yeah, and that's another
you can turn it on and off as well and lock them out once you think that their job is finished. That's
right, exactly. So for those corporate, the paid services, you're right. You can actually set it up so that certain people have access to certain passwords, whereas others don't, and that can be a really effective way of sharing passwords where you need to, but making sure that only those people that need to have the password do have them. Cool, thanks, Emma. So moving right along, I wanted to talk about Office productivity suites, which probably sounds boring, but again, it excites me because they've changed a lot in the last few years. Now, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that if you needed to word process or come up with spreadsheets, PowerPoint presentations, so on and so forth, you would have been faced with the significant upfront cost of purchasing the software. From memory, Microsoft Office were, at one point, I recall it being $600 for the Pro version. But in recent years, there's been many free offerings that have been made available. And then there's other options where you can pay a monthly subscription to get the version whereby now you can actually harness the power of not only the enterprise grade Office productivity, but the full suite of services that used to be hosted on file servers and email servers in the back end of an enterprise or a large organization. So typically, so for Google, there's a number of free products that you can use. They also provide a subscription service as well. And even for Microsoft Office, as an individual, you could be paying as little as $10 a month to get access to the entire Microsoft Office suite. And if you're a student, you can actually pay a lot less as well. Now, For anyone who's watching this session today and you're a small business conscious of costs, you might be more inclined to access those free productivity suites. And I'm aware of a number of small businesses across Darwin who rely solely on things like Gmail, Google Docs, and other video conferencing tools, and typically it meets their ongoing requirements. But if you're a little bit bigger, or you've, I guess, got more of a need to want to make sure that your systems are secure and you've got control over them, these days, like I was saying, for anywhere between $10 to $40 per month per user, not only can you provide everyone with access to Microsoft Office, but you can give them access to the full suite of enterprise functionality that we've had for the last 20 years, but now is only available via these cloud-based services. And what I mean by that, so you've got Office, you've also got access to Microsoft Exchange, which is the email server for disseminating all of your emails. What that means is not only can you set up all of those individual email accounts and mailboxes and shared calendars and resources and so on and so forth, but you can also make sure that those accounts are secure. It runs tools to make sure that there's no malicious emails being sent. It can pick up on whether people are sending credit card details outside of your organisation, as an example. You can control people from not being able to necessarily automatically forward email out of your organisation. And it also provides you with other tools such as SharePoint, which is really, really effective for sharing and collaborating on files. I was not typically a fan of SharePoint many moons ago, but it certainly has come along leaps and bounds and is really effective, especially for me, in being able to collaborate with others online, working on the same document, and sometimes at the same time as well, especially if it's a time-critical tender response, is an example that I can think of for myself. And you've also got access to something called Active Directory, which again allows you to control all of your user accounts and make sure that people have only got access to the files that they should have access to. And it also provides you with an easy means of resetting someone's password, forcing password expirations, disabling someone's password if you need to move them on, or if you've got a concern about their behaviour for whatever reason. You really do, for potentially at $40 a month, you've really got the power of enterprise for what would have costed you tens of thousands of dollars to set up only a few years ago, and then many more thousands of dollars to have to maintain with paid staff on your books looking after that server that would have been sitting in a room somewhere. Now, honestly, I could dedicate a whole session to Microsoft Office 365 and Microsoft 365, which is the back-end tools. So what I might do is, if anyone's got any questions about Office at the moment, we might leave those to the end of the presentation. And if there's a lot of questions or if there's a lot of interest, then it might actually warrant us having another information session to talk about that. Okay, so projects and collaboration tools. So whilst we're working remotely from each other at the moment, being able to effectively collaborate becomes more challenging and yet much more essential. So whilst managing team tasks in emails and spreadsheets and things can help, and I've done that in the past, there are now tools which make this cumbersome task a lot more easier, and it provides better connectivity between colleagues. So as we lose the opportunity for random conversations, and as a means of knowing where our current tasks are at, it'll be really important to track each of these so that people can stay on top of deliverables. So, and we also just want to make sure as well that people don't feel like they're being micromanaged with continual emails asking for updates, so on and so forth. Today, in fact, the presentation that we're putting on today, we were using a tool called Asana that Emma had set up. And so Emma had set me up some tasks within Asana to make sure that I'd written the presentation. I've got an email prepared to go out to you after this session with the presentation as well, to thank you for attending. And so using tools like Asana meant that Emma could assign me those tasks, not have to continually chase me up, and she could see where my progress was at each step of that way. Now previously...
Also, Ben, so that I could track the rest of the team and their involvement in this same little mini project. So we had a marketing team, we had someone doing graphics for the media. Myself, I had to send emails out. I had to just, agree on a time and a date for this. So it's a whole of team approach to the one project so that everybody knows where everybody's up to without having to get on the phone and ask questions. Or even if I know that I need to assign you something else, that I don't want to overwhelm you, because I can go in and see Ben's working on XYZ today. Maybe my task now is not so important and it can wait.
Oh yeah, really, really good point. Yeah, so from my point of view for today's session, it was very straightforward. Create a presentation, create some notes, and type up an email. But you're absolutely right there, Emma. For you, there would have been 100 other tasks that you're managing, and my component, my subset wasn't that important. But you need to know that I'm on top of them. Really good point. And previously, to do it that way, like I was saying, you'd use things like a spreadsheet or emails. Or if you had a really complicated project, you'd have to use something very expensive called Microsoft Project. And Project's really effective. Don't get me wrong. In fact, I was using Project earlier today. But typically, that project file within Microsoft Project can only be updated by one person. And it would depend on that project manager having to continually seek feedback from all the other project members on where they're up to with certain tasks so that they could update their project plan. Whereas what Emma was saying was that as an individual, I was able to update my own tasks, and Emma could see where I was up to without her needing to prod and poke. Had I not updated them, then perhaps I would have heard from Emma. But throughout this scenario, I've not heard from Emma at all. She knew where I was up to. So now we've got a wide range of online platforms which not only allow us to track a project, but also allow for all of the collaborators to provide all of their status updates, as we've discussed. I could have also, if time permitted, changed my timeframes. In actual fact, I believe I did from memory. I had to move it from Monday to Tuesday, so I was able to do that within the tool set. And the other really cool thing about these online project management tools is that rather than you having to dig through emails and try and harvest conversations and email threads, what you can actually do is have those conversations undertaken within the tool. And I know that for some of those programs as well, if you do like email, that's fine. What you can actually do is email your task with the update so that you can still rely on your email. You've got a track of your updates from your email if that's what you like to refer to, but those updates are also communicated back to your project management tool. Very, very cool. And I've found that very effective to being able to manage large and complicated projects in the past where I've got a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of different resources that I'm trying to manage. And the other really good thing about those tools is that you can access them from the website, but also you can install an app on your phone, which again allows you to quickly on the go have a look at where certain tasks are at, reassign them. The functionality on the phone is very similar to what you could experience online.
And we've just had a question.
Yes.
Have you tried all of these and prefer Asana, or do you just use it because it's the one you're familiar with? So I'll answer first. I've used Trello, I've used Project, I've used an Excel sheet, I've used Asana. For me, Trello was really good for a creative type of business.
Yep.
Asana is really good if you like Gantt charts, or if you like working within boards or within lists, because you can choose whether you want a board or a list. With Trello, you don't have a choice. It's block boards, and visually that just doesn't work for me. I prefer lists. I have not used, I believe Monday.com's similar. Is that correct to Asana?
Yes, it is.
Project Turf, I'm not familiar with.
Yeah. So you're right. So Monday.com. So I guess in response to the question, I've used the first three. I've literally only come across the last one in the last week, and I was having a dig around, and they're all same but different. It might depend on the sort of project that you're running or the sort of operational style you need to undertake for your business. Up until only the last few weeks, I'd only, for my own purposes, because I had a paid subscription, I was using Monday.com. And I found that to be similar to using a spreadsheet mixed with Microsoft Project. it's also a really effective tool in that sense, not just for managing projects, but I also found it handy when consulting to other businesses to maintain key registers, for example, to have a look at holiday planning. So things that you would normally maybe do on a spreadsheet as well, but you can then more easily share with the team and have other collaborators working on that same data set. The good thing is that for most of them, so long as you're only small, they're typically free. Even when they're not free, you've actually got a trial period. So what that allows you to do is to have a bit of a fiddle and a play with a number of them before settling on the one that you like. I can't recall which ones I actually trialed 2 years ago when I started off in this journey. Monday.com was the one that I personally settled on. But Asana, Trello, I've used all of them and they're all, from my point of view, really good. Sometimes I just prefer one over the other depending on the type of project that I'm running.
I've used Asana for teams of just myself. Sometimes I use it for uni, tracking my own deliverables. I've used it for teams of up to 5, and I've also used it for teams up to 50 that had multiple locations that we needed to still task them up with things. In the paid subscription of Asana, you can use your Gantt charts, and you're able to prompt people to say, you're holding me up. I can't do my next task because it's locked until you perform your duty. So keep up with the team, which take it how you like. That could be micromanaging, or it could just be don't let the team down. When I did do a paid subscription, I actually used it for a whole building construction project. So we used it for engineering teams, for telecommunication teams, for painting the walls, to getting keys cut, to stocking the floors, to supply chain and logistics, right down to simple admin and onboarding and recruitment as well. So yeah, they're quite handy. Depending on what you want to use them for, they can, be for small little tasks or massive big projects.
Yeah, and one thing I hadn't thought to talk about, but you've just reminded me, is I've also found it really handy for customer relationship management, so CRM. So what I mean by that is where I might be tracking certain opportunities that I might be chasing, be it work with particular clients or be it tenders as well. I've really found it quite effective. So I've previously worked in large enterprise where we'd have a tool for projects, we'd have a tool for CRM, we'd have a tool for this, for that, the other. I've actually found these platforms to be really good at being able to be a tool for many different functions that I've previously relied upon. So definitely worth checking out. And like I said, for most of them, if you're only a small outfit, they can be free. But like I mentioned, most of them offer a free trial period as well.
Yeah, and have a look at your business and what other software you're using to see which of these project tools integrate with your current systems. I know that there are some that integrate well with Xero. I know I was using a project management tool before, and I'm pretty sure Projects does it in Microsoft, where they integrate into MyOb and Xero for your accounting software. With Asana, you can send an email. So if you receive an email from someone saying, can you please do XYZ, it actually recognizes that is a task, and it puts it into Asana for you directly from your email. Or you can manually do it if it was a request that didn't have a question mark. And also, I think Monday.com and Asana, and I think Trello, Asana uses another plugin called Harvest. So it's quite similar to Deputy and Harvest, so that time tracking software that again integrates into Xero or MyOb for your clock in, clock out, and your timekeeping for your payroll.
Yeah, absolutely. And that has been a function I've used with so for my timekeeping, I use a product called T-Sheets, and yeah, you're right. There are different options for integration, and making sure, that's a really good point. You're working on all these projects. Depending on the nature of your work, you want to make sure that you're getting paid for your work on those projects.
Exactly.
Making sure they integrate into your systems is quite important.
Yeah.
Were there any other questions online, Emma?
No, nothing else.
No. Excellent.
But we have been asked to do separate sessions on Asana and Monday.com.
Excellent. All right, no problems. We'll have to have a look.
We should tell Asana and Monday.com who gets them.
We'll ask them for free accounts for everyone attending today. All right, so business as unusual. So look, this is a bit of a crazy period that we're living through, and things are literally changing by the hour. But look, our mental health and our well-being for our colleagues, extended teams, and for ourselves as well is going to be of the utmost importance over the coming weeks and months. And whilst email and messaging apps are useful to get quick updates, what I've found, and I've worked from home for a number of years, what I've found to be really, really important for my mental health at least, is trying to find the time to talk with others as you would in a typical office environment. So I would work remotely. So I had a role based in Darwin, but my main team was based in Melbourne. And for me, I wasn't involved in those corridor conversations or catching up in the kitchen. And so I was always trying to find ways and means that I'd try to catch up with my colleagues over the telephone, and doing simple things as well, like using FaceTime instead of just an audio call, so that I could maintain that connection with my colleagues. It's also really important, even though we can rely on these electronic messaging tools and things, that we do check in, vocally or visually, just so that we can try to find out whether there's anything that we can do to help our colleagues and to see if there's any anxieties that they're facing with all the challenges that we have ahead. It's too easy to feel isolated when you are working remotely and working from home. So obviously our business operations have been completely shaken up in the last fortnight, and we need to accept that returning to normality isn't going to happen anytime soon. So again, it's really important to recognise that we process issues differently as individuals, and where we might be used to the certain work ethic and productivity of our colleagues, we might start to notice that these become different as people become a little bit more stressed or concerned about things that are going on. So it's really important now to focus on what outcomes I believe, this is something I believe, it's really important to focus on the outcomes that we're delivering, as opposed to someone being available 100% of the time between 9 o'clock and 5 p.m. I'm very much a person that believes in your work output is reflected by your deliverables, not whether you've clocked in and clocked out on time, depending on the role, of course. Obviously, if you're a bartender, you need to clock in and clock out, but for the types of work that we'll be performing remotely, that isn't necessarily the case. So be sure to recognise the efforts of those around you, but also another important point is make sure you're recognising your own efforts and achievements as well. So whilst
a little psychological tip there, Ben, and that's really important to recognise what you are doing, especially if you're not doing a standard 9 to 5 and you are moving to a more outcome-based approach. Some people think sitting at their desk is being present, and it's really not if your brain's not in the zone.
Correct.
There's an old trick that people do use, but it's a write down a list. Don't do a to-do list, write down your to-done list. So sometimes when people write a to-do list, it can look really, really daunting. At the start of the list, write down things you've already achieved that day and tick them off, then write down what you have to do. So it already looks like you're mentally tricking yourself into going, I've already started, let's keep going, rather than, oh shit, I've got a huge list to do. Where am I going to start? You already have, so just start ticking them off. Even if they're little things, it's just a psychological trick to keep going.
So Emma, I'm a participant as well as a presenter of this information session. I've just learned something, and you've just stolen my thunder.
I'm sorry.
No. You've stolen my thunder in a great way, because I was actually going to move on to my next slide. Oh, sorry, I won't just yet. I haven't
seen these slides yet.
No.
There was no task in Asana to send to Emma for editing.
So what I was going to say was, and I was going to talk about it later, but personally, I love technology. And, like I was saying earlier, I've got an iPad, iPhone, blah, blah, blah. I've tried different apps to write myself a to-do list, but I never feel that sense of reward by pushing a button to say that I've done it, as opposed to striking something out.
Yeah.
However, I haven't thought of starting that list with what I've done and then what I'm going to do. And that's a really good takeaway for me, because typically I do my to-do list at the beginning of the day. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that at the end of the day, writing down what I've done, and then write down what I'm going to do tomorrow. So thanks, Emma. That's
no worries.
Excellent advice.
And if you tick things off in Asana that you've done it, just for people who may get a kick out of this, a unicorn jumps over a rainbow.
Yes.
It started in 2017. It was the best thing in my day that happened that day, let me tell you.
Right, I've got to try and get my train of thought back now. The last point I wanted to make on here, and it's not a fantastic point, but you might actually find that whilst things seem really uncertain right now, there could also be opportunities for your business to augment and improve and to actually increase your offerings, depending on the sorts of services that you provide, and try to think about that and try not to worry about, I guess, how things were done, but have more of a think about how things can be done. And especially you might also notice, and it's unfortunate, but if you're in a situation to do so, you might find that competitors are starting to leave the market that you're in, or they've temporarily shut down, or they themselves have moved into other areas of service. And so I guess at the moment it's a bit of an opportunity to take check of what it is that you're doing, what you could be doing, and how things could actually be done better. And it's going, for me at least, it's going to be very interesting once we come out the other side of this, how much we go back to doing things the way that we used to do them versus how much we stay with the processes and the tools that we've developed to get through this period. It's going to be very fascinating, and I don't think anyone's really got the answers for that.
Agree with that.
So on the previous slide, I mentioned, trying not to focus on that 9 to 5 p.m. mentality. And given the challenges that we're going to have working from home with competing interests like children and, the regular news updates and needy pets, as an example, I've had to kick my dog out because he was annoying me before I started this thing. But what's really important to try and keep some sort of sense of normality with your working hours is to make sure that you've got a sense of shutting off at the end of each day. When I started out working from home, it became very blurred. I was a single man at the time, and I was finding I was getting up at 9 o'clock in the morning. I was smashing it out until 10, 11 o'clock at night, rinse and repeat. And I really started to lose, any time to shut off, shut down, catch up, and to also reflect and to think. And then, there were times where, because I worked late, I'd sleep in, and it was all becoming very, very messy very quickly. And so for me, what I've found is, I'm not saying stick to the 9 to 5, but try to have those set hours within your day. It might be that you work from 8 until 11 and then 1 until 4, for example, and you try to dedicate that time. But it is important to try to maintain some sort of sense of normality. Another thing that I've found effective for myself, and this might not be for everyone out there, but just getting up and getting dressed in the morning. Some people might prefer to work in their pajamas, and that's fine. But for me, at least, with my mental state, if I'm dressed, if I've done my hair, I've had a shave, and I'm ready to face the day as though I was going to leave the office, I seem to be in more of a business-minded work mode than what it would be otherwise. And at the moment, it's really important that I do that because everyone wants to video conference, and if I didn't have a top on, it might be a little bit embarrassing. So
that was a consideration of myself this morning, going, no one's around, I can wear whatever, and then went, oh no, we're FaceTiming these days. I've got to get ready.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right.
FaceTime as much as you can. Keeps you accountable.
Well, it keeps you accountable, and like I said earlier, I just think it tends to, personalise things a little bit, and to be able to see someone as well just helps build that deeper connection, which is really important. And I think we'll start to realise that if we're not already, as our contact becomes more and more limited. The other thing that I've found really good for not just me to sort of set myself in a work mode, but also for other people in the household, is to I'm not suggesting a lot of people have really big workspaces or houses where they can have a spare room. But if you can try to find a part of the house where you can set up your laptop and you can work from that particular area for the day, not only might that help you set your own mindset that you're working today, but also it could be a trigger and a cue for others in the household to go, shit, Dad's at his desk and he's in work mode, rather than going over and interrupting or wanting to have a conversation. So not only can that help you, but it can also help advertise to others in the household that you're in work mode now, you're not in play mode. Because as we're living, sort of in a confined space together, it might be challenging for people to work that out for themselves at times if we don't do little things like this to try and make a difference. Yeah. Now, even if it means working from your dining room table as opposed to sitting on the lounge, that can make a difference. One thing that really is important, and this is back this morning from an article that I read in the NT News, which I'm happy to send through at the end of today's session, is that make sure that no matter where you're working, you've got a really good, or you've thought about the ergonomics of where you are seated. The reason for that is because whilst we're all forced to have to work from home, we're actually still covered by workers' compensation if needed. In the unfortunate event it is needed, we potentially are still covered. And the article this morning actually went into a number of different interesting scenarios about where you would and wouldn't be covered. So by all means, it's really important to consider your ergonomic setup for where you are working from home. Again, having had some experience, laying in the bed or sitting on the lounge might seem comfortable at the time, but I'm telling you, it's a really easy way to end up in physio, essentially, which unfortunately I think at the moment you probably can't go to physio, so you really don't want to end up in that situation. I was going to talk about FaceTime, but we've mentioned that a few times now. The other point I wanted to make as well is, where I might not be FaceTiming and I'm on a traditional phone call, again, it sounds really silly, but I feel that these little small things do make a difference. And that is, just being able to get up and go for a walk whilst you are talking. I don't think there's an issue at the moment if we were to decide to walk out the front door and walk down the road, so long as it's just us on the phone. So by all means, whilst our travel and our interactions are limited at present, if you can walk around on the phone, I've found that that's something that helps not only facilitate that conversation, but to also sort of clear my mind too.
There is actually a lot of research behind the cognitive engagement of walking and talking. So I hold walking meetings, which are one-on-one with some of the incubator scholars here, but that's because not only do I want everyone to keep agile at the moment, but because when we walk, we are rewiring the synapses in our brain to get them more active and get them more productive as well. We have more productive and meaningful conversations, build better relationships, and we're more focused on the job and what we're trying to discuss whilst we're walking, because we're physically walking towards an end goal. So we want to have it discussed on the way there.
Actually, that's a good point, Emma. I hadn't thought about it like that, in the sense that I guess you'd probably, if you know that you're going to end back up at the front door within 5 minutes, you want to try and finalise that conversation within the 5 minutes.
Correct.
Yeah, we're all learning here today. Crazy times. Look, I'm getting to the end of the presentation now, and my final point was that we're all going to make mistakes. We're going to struggle with new technologies. I love technology. Admittedly, this is the first time I've ever given a presentation over a video conference. Normally they're in person, or I've used video conferences for meetings. So, even for those of us that might be more comfortable with technology, a lot of this is still very much new. And even if I have been working from home, I would find myself in the Innovation Hub fairly regularly, and that may now become quite limited. So this is new for everyone. No one really knows what it is that we're doing exactly. And so we will fail, and that's fine, and we'll learn from those failures. But the really important point is to make sure that everyone knows that we're all in this together. It's imperative to not only be considerate of others, but also not to be so harsh and judgmental on yourself. want to thank everyone for joining us today. I really appreciate the fact that we've got a number of people online. We've had a lot of questions. I think there might be some questions sitting there queued up, Emma, that I saw come through. If
one person was sharing a public sector innovation network newsletter around influencing across distance strategies for impact. Excellent. One person said, my kids are doing their schoolwork well with me, setting a good example in work mindset, and said thank you.
Excellent. Good.
And we had an anonymous attendee point out that allied health are essential services. So at the moment, you can still see a physio. However, they are moving to telehealth.
Yep.
And we've had, I'm using PowerPoint on an iPad and find it quite limited. Would you have any advice on what else they could use?
Okay, I'm a little surprised by that statement because I've found PowerPoint on the iPad. Admittedly, look, it is more limited than the desktop version. I would ask, have you ever tried using Pages? Sorry, not Pages. What Keynote? Keynote on your iPad. That's a free app from Apple, which, to be honest, it actually looks better than PowerPoint when you make a PowerPoint. I don't know if you can respond to that quickly on the chat. But anyway,
we can always take this one offline. The person that asks is a regular here, so we can talk about that one later. Excellent. Tanya, I have it, but how do you spell it? Was it Keynote?
Oh, Keynote. Sorry, so KEYNOTE, Keynote, all one word. It's an Apple-made app. It comes for free with but you can download it for free on your iPhone, your iPad, and your Apple Mac.
Great. And we have had another request on doing a second session on Asana.
Excellent. All right, we'll have to take that up. You have to put it into Asana as a task.
We will do that. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining. This morning we had a session on grants and tendering with Jeff Thomas. We've just had Staying Connected Whilst Working Remotely with Ben Smith. And both of those sessions from today will be up later in the week on our website as these are recorded. On Thursday at 10 a.m. Australian Central Standard Time, we are also having another session with Jeff on how to stay cash flow positive during this time. So make sure you register for that. And if you have any recommendations or suggestions on topics you'd like us to discuss, particularly during whilst we're all working from home, let us know and we will put that in Asana.
Excellent.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for your questions and engagement, and we will see you all again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.